My husband left me for a younger woman, so I married her father, and watching their faces at the wedding reception was worth every calculated moment that led to this twisted family reunion. The morning I found out, my coffee mug shattered against the kitchen floor. Not because I threw it, but because my hand simply stopped working when I saw the text message that wasn't meant for me. David had left his phone on the counter, and the screen lit up with a notification that made my entire world tilt sideways. "Can't wait to see you tonight, baby. Sarah's working late again." The sender's name was Emma, 23-year-old Emma from his office. Emma with the perfect skin and the laugh that made men turn around in restaurants. Emma, who I'd met at the company Christmas party and complimented on her dress while she smiled at me with those glossy lips that had apparently been kissing my husband for months. My legs gave out first. I found myself sitting on the kitchen floor, surrounded by ceramic shards and spreading coffee, staring at that message until the screen went dark. Then I picked up the phone and scrolled through their conversation history, each message a small knife twisting deeper into my chest. 3 months. They'd been together for 3 months. While I was planning our 15th anniversary dinner, he was planning weekend getaways with her. While I was buying him new ties because he said he wanted to look good for work, he was apparently looking good for someone else entirely. The physical pain was immediate and overwhelming. My chest felt crushed, like someone had reached inside and squeezed my heart until it could barely beat. My hands shook so violently I could barely hold the phone. Colors seemed too bright, sounds too sharp. Even the morning light streaming through our kitchen window felt like it was burning my skin. I called in sick to work. I couldn't imagine sitting in meetings, pretending to care about quarterly reports when my marriage was disintegrating in real time. Instead, I spent the day in a fog, moving through our house like a ghost, seeing everything differently. The couch where we used to watch movies together. The bedroom where he'd been lying next to me while texting her. The framed photos of our wedding day, both of us looking so young and hopeful. When David came home that evening, he found me sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of wine and a printed stack of their text messages. His face went white, then red, then settled into the expression of a man who'd been caught and was calculating his next move. He tried to explain. The words washed over me like static. Midlife crisis. Feeling trapped. It didn't mean anything. Classic, pathetic, predictable excuses that men had been using since the dawn of time. But what struck me most was his tone. Not remorseful, not devastated, but annoyed that he'd been caught, inconvenienced by my discovery of his secret life. That night, as he slept in the guest room, I lay awake planning my exit strategy. Divorce lawyers, asset division, custody arrangements for our finances. But somewhere in the dark hours before dawn, a different kind of plan began forming in my mind. I thought about Emma. Sweet, naive Emma, who probably thought she'd won some great prize by stealing another woman's husband. Emma, who was young enough to believe that love conquered all, that she and David would live happily ever after. Emma, who had no idea what she'd actually signed up for. And then I thought about her father. I'd met Robert Chen exactly once, at that same Christmas party where I'd first encountered his daughter. He was a widower, successful, attractive in that distinguished silver-haired way that made women my age glance twice. I remembered thinking he seemed lonely, the way he stood slightly apart from the younger crowd, nursing a whiskey and watching his daughter work the room with the confidence of someone who'd never known real heartbreak. The idea that struck me at 3 a.m. was so audacious, so perfectly twisted, that I actually laughed out loud in the darkness. David stirred in the next room, and I pressed my hand to my mouth, smothering the sound. But the seed was planted, and over the following days, it grew into something beautiful and terrible. I did my research. Robert Chen, 62 years old, CEO of a mid-sized tech company. Widowed 5 years ago when his wife died of cancer. His daughter Emma was his only child, the light of his life, his greatest pride and joy. He'd put her through college, helped her get the job at David's company, still called her every Sunday morning. I learned his routines, his favorite coffee shop, his gym schedule. I joined his gym. I started frequenting his coffee shop. I orchestrated casual encounters with the precision of a military operation, each interaction carefully planned to seem natural and spontaneous. The first time I accidentally bumped into him at Starbucks, I was wearing a soft blue sweater that brought out my eyes and carrying a book I'd researched to match his interests. He recognized me immediately, smiled with genuine warmth, and asked about my husband. I let my face fall just slightly, mentioned we were going through a rough patch, and changed the subject before he could ask for details. Robert had kind eyes. That's what I noticed first. Kind eyes and gentle hands, and the sort of old-fashioned manners that made him pull out chairs and hold doors. He was everything David wasn't: attentive, thoughtful, emotionally available. Talking to him was like slipping into a warm bath after years of standing in the cold. Our coffee dates became a regular thing. Then lunch. Then dinner. He told me about his late wife, how much he missed having someone to share his thoughts with. I told him about my loneliness, my sense that I'd lost myself somewhere in the years of taking care of everyone else. None of it was a lie, not really. The only lie was the omission of why I was really there. The guilt was a constant companion those first few weeks. I'd catch myself laughing at something Robert said, or feeling genuinely happy in his presence, and remember that this was supposed to be about revenge. But Robert made it easy to forget. He was interested in my thoughts, my dreams, my opinions. He listened when I talked instead of waiting for his turn to speak. He asked questions about my work, my hobbies, my childhood. When was the last time David had asked me about my childhood? At home, David was deep in his affair fog. He'd started working late every night, taking weekend business trips that I knew were actually romantic getaways. He'd bought new clothes, started using expensive cologne, and walked around with the satisfied smugness of a man who thought he was getting away with something. Sometimes I caught him smiling at his phone, and I knew he was reading messages from Emma. The day I decided to sleep with Robert was the day I came home to find David had forgotten to clear his browser history, hotel reservations, jewelry purchases, restaurant bookings. He wasn't just having an affair, he was courting Emma with a romance he'd never shown me. The realization that he was capable of grand gestures, just not for me, was the final crack in whatever was left of my heart. Robert and I made love on a rainy Thursday afternoon in his downtown apartment. It was tender and careful, and completely different from the mechanical routine my marriage had become. Afterward, as we lay tangled in his sheets, he traced patterns on my bare shoulder and told me he was falling in love with me. The words should have filled me with triumph. This was the goal, wasn't it? To get close to Emma's father, to position myself for the perfect revenge? But instead, I felt something that took me a moment to identify: genuine happiness. When was the last time someone had looked at me the way Robert looked at me? When was the last time I'd felt desired instead of just convenient? That night, I went home and filed for divorce. David was genuinely shocked. Not heartbroken, not devastated, but shocked, as if he'd never considered that his actions might have consequences. He tried to negotiate, to suggest counseling, to promise he'd end things with Emma. But I was done. I'd found something better, something real, and I wasn't going to let David's sudden panic derail my plans. The divorce proceedings were swift and efficient. David was so eager to avoid a messy public battle that he agreed to my terms without much fight. He could have his precious Emma. I had bigger plans. Robert proposed on a sunset beach in Malibu 6 months after my divorce was finalized. The ring was a vintage emerald that had belonged to his grandmother, not flashy but elegant and timeless. When I said yes, the joy on his face was so pure, so genuine, that I almost forgot this had started as a revenge plot. We planned the wedding for the following spring, a garden ceremony at an elegant hotel, intimate but sophisticated. I insisted on inviting people from David's office, including Emma. It was important that she be there. It was important that they both be there. The morning of the wedding, I woke up in my bridal suite with a strange sense of peace. In the months of planning, something had shifted. Yes, I was marrying Emma's father. Yes, David and Emma would be shocked and horrified when they realized what had happened. But I was also marrying a man who loved me, who cherished me, who made me feel beautiful and valuable and heard. I chose my dress carefully, an off-white silk that whispered against my skin. Elegant and age-appropriate, but still stunning. I wanted to look radiant, glowing, like a woman who'd found her perfect match. I wanted David to see what he'd lost. I wanted Emma to see what her father had gained. The ceremony was perfect. Robert's eyes filled with tears when he saw me walking down the aisle. His vows were personal and heartfelt, spoken like a man who'd thought he'd never have love again and couldn't quite believe his luck. My own vows were honest in a way that surprised me. I promised to honor him, to cherish him, to build a life together based on mutual respect and genuine affection. I didn't see David and Emma until the reception. They were sitting at a table near the back, and I could feel their eyes on me as Robert and I had our first dance. I'd chosen the song carefully, something romantic but not overly sentimental, something that spoke of new beginnings rather than fairy tale endings. It was during the father-daughter dance that reality hit them. Of course, Robert didn't have a daughter to dance with. His daughter was sitting at table 12, her face growing paler by the minute as she watched her father spin his new wife around the dance floor. Instead, Robert danced with me again, and I could see the exact moment when Emma connected the dots. Her face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, disbelief, horror. She grabbed David's arm, whispered something urgent in his ear. David's head snapped up and he stared at us with the kind of shock usually reserved for natural disasters. I caught Emma's eye across the room and smiled. Not a vindictive smile, not a triumphant smirk, but a genuine, happy smile. The smile of a woman who'd found her place in the world. The smile of a woman who'd turned her life around in the most unexpected way. The rest of the evening was a masterclass in social tension. David and Emma stayed, probably too stunned to leave, but they barely spoke to anyone. Other guests began to notice the drama, the whispered conversations, the way people kept glancing between our table and theirs. I could practically see the gossip spreading through the room like wildfire. During the toasts, Robert spoke about second chances and unexpected love. He talked about how sometimes the best things in life come when you're not looking for them, when you're open to possibilities you never imagined. He thanked me for bringing joy back into his life, for showing him that it was possible to love again after loss. I found myself crying during his speech, and they weren't tears of manipulation or calculated emotion. They were real tears, the kind that come from being seen and valued and chosen. When Robert kissed me at the end of his toast, the applause was genuine and warm, except for the conspicuous silence from table 12. The confrontation came during the cake cutting. Emma approached me while Robert was talking to his business partner, her face flushed with anger and what looked like the beginnings of tears. She stood close enough that our conversation couldn't be overheard, but I could see David hovering nearby, clearly desperate to know what was being said. Emma's voice was shaking as she accused me of manipulation, of using her father, of destroying her family out of spite. I listened to her tirade with the calm patience of someone who'd already won. When she finished, I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt something unexpected. Not hatred, not even anger, but a kind of sad recognition. She was so young, so certain that the world revolved around her feelings, so convinced that her pain was the only pain that mattered. I told her, in a voice barely above a whisper, that I loved her father, that he made me happy in ways she couldn't understand, that sometimes the best revenge is living well, and I was living very well indeed. She wanted to know if I'd planned this from the beginning, if I'd set out to hurt her. I thought about lying, about claiming it was all a coincidence, but decided on honesty. I told her yes, I'd approached her father deliberately, but I also told her that somewhere along the way it had stopped being about revenge and started being about love. The wedding ended with David and Emma leaving early, slipping out during the dancing without saying goodbye to anyone. I watched them go from the dance floor, Robert's arms around me, his chin resting on my shoulder. I felt a sense of completion, of justice served, but also something deeper, satisfaction that had nothing to do with them at all. Our honeymoon was 2 weeks in Italy, and I barely thought about David and Emma once. We wandered through vineyards and ancient cities, made love in hotel rooms overlooking the Mediterranean, talked about our future with the excitement of people who'd found each other against all odds. Robert was an attentive lover, a thoughtful companion, a man who seemed genuinely fascinated by my thoughts and dreams. When we returned home, the ripple effects of our marriage were still spreading through David's social circle. His relationship with Emma had reportedly become strained. Apparently, she wasn't handling the situation well. There were rumors of fights, of her accusing him of being responsible for her father's betrayal, of their perfect romance cracking under the weight of real-world complications. I heard through mutual friends that David had started telling people I was crazy, that I'd married Robert purely out of spite. The accusation might have bothered me once, but I was too happy to care. Every morning, I woke up next to a man who brought me coffee in bed and asked about my plans for the day. Every evening, I came home to someone who was genuinely interested in how my day had gone. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be in a partnership instead of a performance. 6 months after the wedding, I ran into David at the grocery store. He looked older, stressed, like a man who'd realized that the grass wasn't actually greener on the other side. When he saw me, his face went through a series of expressions: anger, embarrassment, something that might have been regret. He asked how I was doing, and I told him I was happy. Really, genuinely happy. He asked about Robert, and I told him Robert was wonderful, kind, attentive, everything a woman could want in a husband. I didn't say it to hurt him, but I could see that it did. David told me he and Emma were having problems, that she blamed him for the situation with her father, that she couldn't handle the gossip and the complicated family dynamics. He said it like he expected sympathy, like he'd forgotten that he was the one who'd destroyed our marriage in the first place. I listened with the detached interest of someone observing a stranger's problems. His pain wasn't my pain anymore. His mistakes weren't my responsibility. I wished him well, and I meant it, the way you might wish a casual acquaintance well without really caring about the outcome. A year later, I heard that David and Emma had broken up. She'd moved to another city, taken a job with a different company, apparently eager to escape the complicated mess her life had become. David was reportedly dating someone new, another young woman from his office. Some men never learn, but I'd learned. I'd learned that revenge doesn't have to be destructive. Sometimes the best revenge is building something beautiful from the ashes of what was broken. I'd learned that love can surprise you, that it can sneak up on you when you're focused on something else entirely. I'd learned that sometimes the best way to heal from betrayal is to find someone who shows you what loyalty actually looks like. Robert and I have been married for 3 years now. We travel together, laugh together, build a life together based on mutual respect and genuine affection. He's met my friends, I've met his. We've created a social circle that has nothing to do with David or Emma or the dramatic circumstances that brought us together. Sometimes when I'm feeling particularly philosophical, I think about the chain of events that led to this happiness. If David hadn't cheated, if I hadn't found those text messages, if I hadn't been desperate enough to concoct such an elaborate revenge plan, I never would have met Robert. I never would have discovered that I was capable of being loved the way he loves me. The woman who married her ex-husband's mistress's father might sound like a calculating villain in someone else's story, but in my story, she's the hero who refused to let betrayal define her. She's the woman who turned her pain into purpose, who found love in the most unexpected place, who proved that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. And I am living well. Better than well. I'm living the life I didn't even know I wanted, with a man who sees me as a prize rather than a consolation, who chose me with clear eyes and a full heart. David lost a wife who would have done anything for him. Emma lost the respect of her father, who may forgive but will never forget how she contributed to the destruction of another woman's marriage. But I didn't lose anything. I gained everything. I gained a husband who loves me, a life that fulfills me, and the knowledge that I'm strong enough to turn even the worst betrayal into something beautiful. My husband left me for a younger woman, so I married her father, and it was the best decision I ever made.